And the river still shines and shimmers in the light as it did in our grandfather's day, when they rode all night to fish in the morning and lived in Willapa Bay.
Looking for Shannon Zellerhoff. I understand that she, and this is her second year here, fished for 10 years, mostly Bering Sea. Is that right? And crab, longline, occasional Bristol Bay. A merchant sailor, a sister of mine. I was a merchant sailor long ago. Well, come on up. Good to see you.
Good evening, everyone. Before I begin, I'd just like to thank everyone that put this together for the 24th year. It's really powerful stuff to have journaled and written and collected writings, and after all that time, finally make it on board the Fisher Poets boat. So my background is commercial fishing in the Bering Sea. I cut my teeth on the Arrow with David Kelly, Charlie Tuna. They're from Clatsop County, and was desperate to get out onto the crab boats. Is that better? So for some sick reason, I fell in love with Opilio season, and thankfully when I was 10, my mom gave me a journal, and she said, "You're going to want to remember the things you did in your life, so write them all down." And most of these poems are on their like 50th iteration from journals that I wrote after like 20, 40, 60. Mike Engel on the Zellerhoff, 64 hours we did on deck. So a lot of that stuff would just scribble off the margins, and over the last 30 years of my life I've been trying to make it distilled so that the experience can live on. All right, so this first poem is called Ode to the Carrick Bend. God, I wear readers now. My poetry was cut from frozen line, severed like the eternal link we grunted at, then hammered apart over the rail. Nothing represented the union we felt between the soles of our boots and the bottom of the sea, like the Carrick Bend did. Sometimes daydreams and reveries arose unpleasantly, like that rotting stench from the rust-stained bins sinking, storm by storm, into the soft Aleutian mud. When the ice pack came down, squeezing us south off our lucrative grounds, my thoughts seemed useless, like the hacked-off clumps of polypropylene and nylon knots. Ashore, to lick my wounds, I peeled phrases off my skin like scabs. From dim recollections of otherwise incomprehensible observations, the detritus of last trip's guilty sorrows emerged. Like a translucent sun, after weeks of winter rain, my thoughts crystallized. What would an archaeologist have to say from our waste? What would this intransigent sea say if I did not speak for it? Often, I became overwhelmed by my existential angst. My head, balanced on an edgy precipice of sleep deprivation and battle-charged euphoria for crab, demanded I ignore the raven's eyes, those shaggy gendarmes of the Bering Sea. When at last we made that long, long run north and west, back to the grounds, nearly to Petropavlovsk, I took up an intermittent residence in the crucible of my sleep. But it was not the boat slowing down or the whine of the hydraulics that called me back from the sleep. It was not the rejuvenating odor of the frying bacon the cook was doing in the galley. It was the impatient meditation forged before an unforgiving horizon, lachrymose and white. Words were wanting out of my head. And resurrected, I sat with my pen clenched in a stubborn hand that would not close, forfeiting even coffee to make my manifest mark. Thank you. This second one, for those of you who remember Peggy Dyson, WBH-29 Kodiak on the single sideband, that's how we got our weather back then. And so this is kind of a nod to Peggy and just some memories. It's called Area 12 Alpha, please. I take a look at the calendar, swinging like a pendulum across the bulkhead. To keep things light, the captain has taken to marking down my occupation du jour. On the 8th, I was going to quit fishing, join the Navy. On the 11th, I was dreaming about moving someplace warm, become a peanut farmer. By the 17th, our pots hauling water, I was missing my cousin's horses, and I became dead set on the Dakotas for a week. I swore every day that I'd quit the sea for good, hire out as a cowboy, cutting steer through the snow on a Mustang named Butte. After anchor watch, I walked towards the stern with a black garbage bag, faced the wind, opened it up, pretended it was a sail. I started stuffing in the garbage the gulls had pulled out. Figured it was high time to go back to Nassau or Camden, anywhere with a yawl or a ketch or a sloop. Task completed, I sat down on a bright pink buoy to listen to the quiet of the harbor. You could hear the waves rake the side of the hull with a rasping sigh. From the wheelhouse, familiar radio chatter, the awful low price set down for our crab, the awful high price of fuel and bait, the stale donuts the greenhorn stole from the cannery galley. You would think we had all been marched down to this vocation at gunpoint. But our once lofty dreams were cut down occasionally by that threat of the early death, which rang around our eyes like the years on a stump. Area 12 Alpha, please. Thank you. When I first got to Dutch Harbor, it was in June 1991, I think. We went in on the Arrow, and everything was verdant green, and the salmon berries were luscious and red, and we were out at the spit, and this ancient old blue station wagon came down, and there was this beautiful woman with a bandana on her head and 2 cases of beer, and her name was Verla Robinson. Over the years, I was crab fishing up there. I'd often fly into Dutch with $5, because in those days, if you remember, you could go from A to B for $5. So Verla took me in a lot, and she was kind of my mom. And this poem's dedicated to her. Ode to Verla Robinson. Winter mistook the limp codfish lying on the metal dock for a used sock. Then it passed its cold, arbitrary face across eyeballs no longer fresh, leaving those roomy globes for the raven's beak to worry. One of the harbor lights flickered and dimmed, and the leaden clouds let down their snow. Fine dendrite crystals fell from the perihelion glow of the moon, silvering down into the mud blanketing of the dock into white. A raft of harlequin ducks paddled by, silent as cordwood floating on the ebb. In the grease ice, they left no wake. From the shore, the canneries and their generators sang an industrial composition into the Aleutian breeze. The groaning of forklifts trotting along barked their tines against wooden cleats. Vats of pollock and cod guts steamed like small refineries. One trawler winked like a star as she bent around the reef. And everyone was tucked inside those quaint, war-remembered cabanas with their benevolent oil stoves and their frost-paned windows, out of which gazed their cats and their dogs and their reliquaries. The vertebrae of a humpback whale sitting dusty beside a broken narwhal tusk, glass floats and baleen, books wedging down last summer's pressed flowers, the cylinder from the old Detroit engine jammed against the door, and that coal-black sketch a soldier once made of a cloud leaning over the hill where Verla once told me the herring shack stood when the mailboat of her namesake used to steam west over shoals of herring and banks of cod. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Thanks, Shannon. Nice images. Danny Kaiser, sorry. He's a geezer, but his name is Kaiser. Sorry about that. From Chinook, Washington, which is that away, right across the river. Bering Sea Strong.
Yes.
Yes.
Also known as, born and raised right here in Astoria, Oregon. I can throw a rock into the river where I earned my very first commercial fishing dollar. But right on, yeah. 40% Tennessee hillbilly, 60% Yugoslavian, and 100% Astoria fighting fishermen. But I truly cut my teeth in the industry in 1991 when I sailed to the Bering Sea on a little vessel called the Maverick. Truly the toughest fishery on the planet. Now, I was built for the Bering Sea. Strong, athletic, and emotionally unstable. Many people ask, Dan, what did you do with all that money you made in the Bering Sea? Well, I tell you, 90% of it I spent on women, whiskey, and having a good time. The other 10% I just wasted. Now, when we would get ready for the season, we would travel across the Gulf of Alaska. We would head up early. There was the king crab fishery around the Pribilof Islands in September. Then we would move into Garibaldi and the red king crab season. But then the beast of them all was the Opilio season of the Bering Sea. If you can imagine, and now this environment does not exist any longer. Much like if you think about the Iron Curtain of the Steelers in the 70s, the bad boy Detroit Pistons of the late 80s, and the Bering Sea crab fishermen of the 90s. It was truly one of the most grueling fisheries that existed on the planet. We would spend month after month fighting through the weather and the ice and the grueling exhaustion, soul-crushing exhaustion. Now, most of this was staged within the confinements of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. And I'm just going to really quickly start my timer. So that we do not move past our allotted time. There we go. Now, Dutch Harbor was a barren place. Gravel roads, there was no paving, there was no real existence other than just brute force work. The masculinity that would run around Dutch Harbor was just intoxicating. There was a stance of trees, I think there were 6 or 7 of them. They called them the state forest. And they swore to us that there was a girl behind every one. They were far too skinny to house the girls of Dutch Harbor. So the first piece that I'm going to share, since yes, this is supposed to be a venue of poetry, is doing it in Dutch. Dutch Harbor was the place we would ready for the race. King crab in October, and Garibaldi was still in place. Come January would be Opie's. This truly was the test. We get the gear together, get fuel, get bait, get rest. The ice, the wind, the freezing spray. And that's just here in Captain's Bay. Dutch Harbor is always moving at such a crazy pace. Some pound the dock, they need a boat. As days wear on, they still have hope. You walk the streets in your little pack, the name of your boat worn proudly on your back. The crew is tight, we drink, we fight. A girl behind every tree, that's 1 for you and 2 for me. The season, that's what it's all about. We say a prayer and head on out. We start the grind, we've moved northwest. The days will pass with little rest. Return to Dutch. The boat is full. Unload the crab. More boat, more bait, more fuel. You make the most of your time on land. There are few limits with that draw check in hand. A place so cold and far from home, you wait your turn to use the phone. The kids are fine. They miss their dad. You say goodbye, your time is done. There's crabs to catch, no time for fun. The race is on to catch the most. then back to Dutch to raise a toast. That's how it goes for months on end. Dutch Harbor at times is my best friend. The season is done, gears on the beach, no long embrace or sad goodbyes. Dutch Harbor sucks. It's time to fly. Now, I know many people are familiar with the deadliest catch was really an exaggeration and does a terrible disservice to the Bering Sea crab fisheries. There was a group of men, some chasing a dream, some just desperate to hang on to what they have. It's an interesting group of men, to say the least. Now, everybody aboard the decks of these boats has a certain responsibility. And the way that we share the take, basically the revenue aboard this boat, is you get a percentage. So if you've got, and the average percentage for the deck was 30%. So if you've got 5 guys out on deck, everybody gets 6 if it's dispersed equally. You take one more, it's a little less. You take one, it's a little less. If you take one less, it's a little bit more. Now, if anybody is familiar with a schooner vessel is something that you see. The house is in the stern of the boat. The crew is out in front of the captain. They're hauling the gear from the bow. Not nearly quite as protected, but a much more safe environment as far as the captain being able to see what's going on deck. And then if you see a boat such as the Northwestern, the house is in the bow. The crew is actually hauling the gear from the middle of the ship. They're a little more protected, although the captain does not have constantly a view of what is happening on deck. Now, the most integral part of this crew is the grappler. As this boat is moving on, and I've spent my whole career in the Bering Sea working on a schooner-style boat, standing up in the bow, and as that bow is riding up over the top of 25, 30-foot waves, once in a while you get a peak of the buoy, and then it disappears in the crest of the next wave. Well, as the grappler, your responsibility, you've got a big stainless hook hooked to a line that's maybe 30 feet long, is to grapple that buoy coming along the bow, pull it in to the side of the boat as fast as you can, throw it into the block, and then into the coiler as it hauls that pot up off the bottom of the ocean. Now, you do just not stand there and wait for that pot to come up through the block. There's so much more to do. Once you get everything on board, it's pulling up through the block, you run up over to the sorting table, you shove a few crabs down in the hole, you might run over and put a bait setup or two together, and you're listening. Now, if we're fishing king crab, we might only be in 30, 35 fathoms, 6 feet to the fathom. So you've got one shot. If we're fishing for apelio crabs, we may be as deep as 100 fathoms, which will you will have 3 shots of line, which means you're listening for 2 knots. So you grapple it on board, you throw it in the block, and now you're listening for those knots to come through the block. You run back over, shove a few crabs, make a bait setup, and as that second knot comes through the block, you hustle on back to the rail, hook that pot up, pick it up, land it in the launcher, sort through the crab, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. Days on end, months on end, until that season is said and done. So my next piece is called the grappler, and this was one of my favorite positions on the boat, because it definitely took the most athletic and energetic individual standing on that deck. In the screaming gale and freezing spray, there is one man standing at the rail. Out of the darkness and into the light, it's the man with the grapple, ready for the fight. Buoys on the bow, it's time to let her fly. That shining stainless grapple, it takes a special eye. She streaks into the darkness with a line for a tail. You've hooked the trailer. It's time to haul her in. Throw her in the block. We're on the clock. This is the real deal. You don't stand around as the block sits and spins. The crabs on the table need to get into the tank. You shove the crabs in silence as you listen for the knots. That's how you will know when the pot's about up. Racing back to the rail, the pot is finally here. The hook is in, reverse the block, and raise above the rail. Dog her down, dump her out. This is what it's all about. It's the same every time. Throw the hook, haul the line. The grappler is the man that will set the bloody pace. Through screaming winds and giant seas, the grappler cannot fail. The grappler is the man standing fearless at the rail. Now, as I shared within my introduction, born and raised right here in Astoria, Oregon. Although I do consider myself to be a tuna brat, my mother's side of the family were fishers. They fished this river for most of their life. My father's side worked within the cannery. Bumblebee Seafoods was such an integral part of this community. But in 1979, they shut down Elmore Cannery. Now, we were one of the fortunate ones that were transferred down to San Diego with the company, where we were there for 3 years, and then we moved on to Hawaii, where we were there for 3 years, and then my father took a job in American Samoa, where we were there for 5 years. So we truly had a chance to travel outside of our geographical environment. But still, we would constantly travel back to Astoria. This is where our family has been for generations. My grandfather, Andrew Marinkovich, came through Ellis Island in 1913 and made his way to Clifton, Oregon, where our family still has our homestead. Now, Astoria, from what I remember, and I can remember coming back as a child, and I always would, hope that when we would come back to visit for a month every year, that just like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, that I would see steam and smoke once again coming out of the stacks of Elmore Cannery. But it just never was to be. It has become a community truly striving for an identity. A community grasping so tightly at the tourism dollars in a desperate effort just to keep the lights on. It is just not a vision of what my childhood home once was. I do live in Chinook, Washington, which essentially looks straight back across the river here at Astoria, Oregon. Every morning on my way to work, I'm coming across the Astoria Bridge, and I can see the sun rising behind Coxcomb Hill, which is the hill which the Astoria Column sits on. On a clear day, I can see Mount St. Helens to the left. Majestically, I can see Saddle Mountain standing behind the town of Astoria, and I can still truly believe that this is the home of my past. And then to the right is the graveyard of the Pacific. This truly is my home, and that is my last piece. January 8th is the day God gave to me. I was truly born around the corner and just a few blocks up the street. My father was so proud. He worked for Bumblebee. My mother's side were fishers. This river was their dream. They set their nets adrift as the salmon swim upstream. Clifton was the town, and Marinkovich was the name. A family catching salmon, legends in the game. As a young boy growing up, I watched them work in awe. The men were bigger than life, and my blood ran in my veins, and their blood ran in my veins. I had a skiff and a piece of net. My drift, it was an inside set. I'd watch the men unload their catch. Sweet smell of money, that's what they said. As summer would near, they would ready the gear. north to Alaska, they would all disappear. I hoped as I grew older, they would take me with one day. That day did never come. The bumblebee up and flew away. Elmore Cannery is where I would play, fishing off the dock as my father worked away. When they shut down Elmore, a piece of Astoria died that day. We would hitch a ride with that big bee. San Diego and Hawaii were just 2 stops for me. Yet destiny would have its way, and I would come home to fish one day. My first drift when I came back was on this river with my Uncle Jack. Yet that was not enough for me, so I packed my bag for the Bering Sea. As I look back and reminisce, the home of my past does not exist. The pilings mark what now is gone. I walk the dock, I work the trade. Slowly I watch as the memories fade. I close my eyes, I hope, I pray, to find my home of yesterday. Well, thank you very much for letting me be part of your Fisher Poets weekend. And I suggest you put a couple pumps of grease in the old rudder post, light her up, and let Astoria know that the fishermen are back in town.
Hoo-wee. That guy doesn't need an amplifier. Thank you, Danny. Local boy. My daughter graduated, both of my daughters graduated from Astoria High. Fighting fishermen. Alana Kansaku-Sarmiento, raised in Hawaii, lives in Portland, Bristol Bay since 2015, and since 2015 at Fisher Poets, right? Wow, okay, there's some history there. Come on up.
Oh, there's history, all right. But yeah, there's so many people who have been fishing for, I don't know. I just feel so honored to get to hear stories and meet people and cross paths with folks who have been coming to this gathering and who have been in this industry for many more years than I have. And thank you all for being here and for supporting that. It lets me come and hear cool things and meet cool people too. So my name is Alana. Thank you to my hosts. Thanks to the Astoria Brewing Company. I'm gonna read, so yeah, my first season in Bristol Bay was 2015, and my first Fisher Poets Gathering was technically 2016 as a result of that following winter. I'm tonight gonna read all of my earliest pieces from 2016 and some from 2017. And this first piece I'm gonna dedicate to my father's uncle, Tío Pedro, who passed away last night, who was a brilliant man, so intelligent, like so book smart, razor sharp wit, super funny, super kind. And he helped raise my father. And so I have a lot to thank him for, because my father then raised a woman who felt confident enough to strike out on her own as a commercial fisherman in 2015 without any family connections or friend connections. So ripple effects are real. This is called Seasons. Some seasons are marked by the changing of leaves or the falling of snow. Some seasons are marked by the packing of bags and new places to go. Some seasons last for years and are made of the same work or words or people or exhaustion or joy that you began with. Some romances have many seasons. Some romances are comprised of a single spring and 1,000 opened buds. Past seasons are for learning from, while the anticipation of future seasons drives us. Will this season hold a candle to the last? Could it possibly be any better? Could it possibly be any worse? The first week of June is a tiny season in and of itself. I tie up loose ends. I make sure I have all the wool socks and cotton underwear I need. I kiss my current boyfriend goodbye. I eat my last mid-rare burger with fries. I double-check flight times. I go. Sorry, I'm a little snotty. The boatyard is home once again. Common colors of this season are gray and brown. The yard is filled with aluminum, gravel, and mud, filled with storage containers and hopeful fishermen, filled with drunk fishermen, filled with people easing into a reduced hygiene schedule, filled with diesel and oil and wrenches and mending needles. We're all preparing for our favorite holiday this time of year, the opener. And then it comes. 'Tis the season to wet your gear, to make sure your boat still floats, and that the only holes in your net are the ones supposed to be there. And just like leaves change color without your notice until suddenly they're all on fire, the days grow longer and longer until you're at the peak of salmon fishing in Bristol Bay. 12-hour openers, followed by 3 hours of travel and cleaning, followed by 2 hours of sleep, followed by 1 large cup of coffee, followed by a 12-hour opener, followed by a 12-hour opener, followed by a 12-hour opener. The season can't seem to decide whether it wants to be light or dark. Tempers flare, sleep is rare, everyone has seen everyone else's ass bare. The bay seems to shrink with so many people hunting so many fish, but the fish, oh my God, the fish. Mercifully, the state finally decides to open the season without time limits, which means more sleep, as it turns out. It also means that some boats are already deciding to pack it in. The captain is regularly getting at least 6 hours of sleep, so it's the beginning of the end. And why do we come back? Why do we fish? Whatever your reason, you might be a little sad to see the season wrapping up, but it's not the end. Or it doesn't have to be. Seasons are cyclical, are they not? Time to go home, back to regular showers and mid-well burgers, back to sweaty pints and sweaty nights with the people you missed. In some ways, it seems like a dream. It's a good thing we brought back some tokens. A filthy shirt, a fat check, some new scar, an ice chest of fillets. 'Tis the season to feast, to remember, and to look forward. But then again, isn't it always? Thank you. This is a poem again from my first season up here that I love to read when John Broderick is in the room. It's called We're the Coolest, and it is a poem about a very special holiday called Fish Naked Day that was established by a certain family that starts with a B that fishes in Bristol Bay, one member of whom co-founded FisherPoets. And when the holiday, I'm not looking anywhere in particular when the holiday was established, the peak of salmon season was a lot earlier than it tends to be now. And so July 7th was kind of like things had calmed down, the height of the fish run had passed, and as years go by, the run gets later and later, and July 7th is no longer a viable day to fish in the nude, you're often, it's just not really, it's not a thing. So I'm glad to say that I got to experience it at least 1 year. And this is my story. The weather is cold as we disrobe. It's Fish Naked Day, or so I've been told. Excited I was all spring and summer, but when the day came, oh, what a bummer. The weather is chilly, the water is gray, a little too nippy for some on this day. But talk comes cheap, and we women are proud. After months of big talk, giving up's not allowed. We grab ice from our tender, all clothing in place, then pull up to our nets, stony brows set in place. It is time, I declare. Taylor groans but commits as I begin to uncover my pale, frigid tits. Bare feet are set on the aluminum floor. Asses are bared to the Nushagak shore. A cold pile of gear laying lonely and stiff with the salt of our work in the bow of our skiff. We heave and we hoe as we pull up our nets, and others trade money from won or lost bets. Some drive extra far today as they pass us. Some drive extra close and put on their glasses. Wind and salt touch exposed shoulders and toes. Nothing but air covers us floor to nose. Our catch comes aboard as we haul up the mesh. Slimy fish bits cover our flesh. We laugh and we hunch our shoulders in tight to keep cold at bay as we sample our might. 40 minutes pass by. It counts, we exclaim, as we decide to put our clothes back on that cold day. A tip of the hat as a neighbor drives by, a gesture for ladies from the classiest guy. That actually happened. Our skin all prickly from the cool Bristol air, we slip back in our gear, bums no longer bare. One thing we've discovered along with the bay, we're tough and we're bold despite cold on this day. So remember us when 7/7 rolls around. Get naked and fish, good catch will abound. Thank you so much. I hope that was just the right amount of incriminating, just the sweet spot. And my last piece for you folks here tonight is called Home. The ocean is not my home, and yet she is like a mother to me. Home is where mother is. The ocean is not my home. I cannot, with my nostrils, my lungs, my mouth, my blood, pull the life-giving oxygen that my body needs from her waters, as some other creatures can. Creatures that do indeed call the ocean home. Creatures that live in a universe that exists on this earth but is out of this world. A universe that our land-loving bodies cannot fully comprehend, but one intertwined with everything our land-born selves inherently know. That is the cycle of life. Water, its foundation. From ocean to sky to ground to body to ocean to sky to ground. A universe that is foreign, that is dangerous, that repels me like a splinter out of flesh. A universe that draws me like a song. Deep space that lets you drift for hours on end, if in fact time can be measured in the void. A universe where gravity does not seem to exist until it pulls with the warning of a perfect storm as you draw near those planets, those stars, those black holes. A universe in which you can drift for a lifetime, then suddenly be sucked in to rock or flame against your will. A universe that tosses you with the gentleness of a rolling wave. A universe that gives life, that is the very dust of life. A universe that takes indiscriminately in its blackness, in its depth. The ocean is not my home. I am not a fish of the star or jelly or tuna variety. I'm not an urchin crawling along the seafloor, feeding on the decay of my world. I am not a mollusk, soft-bodied and blind. I'm not a crab. I'm not a porpoise. I'm not a shark. I'm not a whale. I'm a human. Homo sapiens sapiens. I walk on 2 legs and I swim with the ease of a creature that was born to run. The ocean is not my home, and yet I'm homesick for her. Thank you.
Now blow the gentle wind o'er the dark blue sea, no more will stay thy hand, since Willie is safe at home with me in his own dear native
Thanks for talking to us today. Can you tell me your name and where you're from?
My name is Ken Kastner, and I'm from Homer, Alaska.
Whoa, Homer, did you come all the way from Homer for this event?
I did.
I'm speechless. So let me think real quick here. Please tell me your story and what motivated you to come down here and what you're doing in the Fisher Poets Gathering.
Well, my sweetie of 51 years is one of the presenters here, and this is her 4th Fisher Poets. So normally I would not be attending, but this year I said, okay, I'm coming. And so I had meetings in Juneau, and we came from Juneau to here, and I'm flying back tomorrow. But it's been fun so far.
Well, what was your favorite? Okay, you do have a favorite, so unbiased, what was your other favorite thing so far?
Well, I was at the Liberty Theater all last night, and there were some really wonderful things, and I don't even remember the cowboy Fisher poet. He came out with a costume that was split in half. He had a hip boot on one leg and a cowboy boot on the other leg, and he had made a garment that was a half a fishing jacket and half a cowboy vest, and he called himself a transfishmite. So. No, he's quite funny and a great poet. And he's known for cowboy poetry, but he's been coming here for years and years, and he's just part of the crowd now. So that was fun.
What else can we tell folks that will entice them to come and maybe give them any tips of good ways to enjoy themselves?
Well, it's an event that incites some creativity in everybody. So I've written a couple of poems. One of them got read last night, and then I'm going to compete tonight in the competition, the 30-second competition, where you have to include the word full moon, and it has to be 30 seconds, and you have to have 5 Bodhi prepositions. So anyway, I've got that composed, but I'm in the first line and the last line has to be the same except different.
Well, we think we're going to try and be there tonight to witness that, so we'll look forward to seeing you again, and thanks for stopping to talk with us.
Sure. What's this for?
Oh, did I not start with that? So we're working on a Fisher Poets Gathering archive, and it's our buddy's pet project, and he gets the equipment, and we come out and we record a lot of the performances, as many as we can get to. Yeah. We set up in 2 or 3 venues. We record the performances, and then we do these little on-street interviews. And then he does a whole bunch of editing and tries to upload them and get them all uploaded to Facebook.
Where were you last night?
We were at Astoria Brewing Company. He was live streaming at Liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Okay. Well, good. Good luck with your project.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for stopping and helping us out.
Sure.
Appreciate it.